This is Matthew Kratter from Bitcoin University, and today I want to talk about what I'm calling Ethereum's hairball moment. It's not about Vitalik about to cough up a hairball like a cat, which he looks like he's about to do in this picture. It's rather about a much more serious problem with Ethereum that you should be aware of if you are on the side of freedom and if you own Ethereum, because this is what's coming to Ethereum's future. Ever since Ethereum's move from proof of work to proof of stake, what was called the merge back in late 2022, the largest validators, which is what you have under proof of stake instead of miners, you have validators. All of these largest validators for ETH have been large regulated companies that have to register with the US. So to the extent that these companies do business in the US or with US allies or are part of the US financial system, they're required to impose censorship that is required by the US government, in particular OFAC. We've talked about them a lot. They're an agency that's under the US Treasury, and they're in charge of economic trade sanctions and also looking after things like terrorist money, for example. Now let's pretend for a moment that there are still people in the Ethereum community who are not just in this game just to build spy coins for the US government, in other words, central bank digital currencies. Hopefully there's still a few freedom-minded individuals left in the Ethereum community. That's what I'm going to assume for this video. If you want to know more about how Ethereum and its founders have been collaborating to build government spy coins, you can check out this video, which I'll link to in the description notes below. This is ConsenSys, founded by Joe Lubin, who is one of the co-founders of Ethereum as well. ConsenSys is very important as well because they run most of the nodes for Ethereans through Infura. They also own MetaMask, and then they have this connection to central bank digital currencies. So this is something to be quite concerned about. But let's assume that not everyone in the ecosystem is interested in becoming a trader and cooperating with the government. So we're going to talk about what would happen if these more freedom-minded individuals try to do something about Ethereum. And in order to do that, we first need to take a look at who the large ETH stakers are. We have Lido, Coinbase, Binance, Kraken, etc. And they control, you can see how much ETH is staked under each of them. Now, if the US government were ever to apply severe pressure to large regulated Ethereum validators like Coinbase, Kraken, Lido, Binance, etc., to censor Ethereum transactions or Ethereum blocks, I'd like to think, as I said, that some percentage of the Ethereum community would resist such pressure and decide to do a hard fork and try to fork away from OFAC compliance. So we'd have two forks. The first fork would be the OFAC, what I'm calling the OFAC bootlicker ETH, which agrees to impose US government censorship at the protocol level for Ethereum. And you can be sure that Vitalik and Joe Lubin will be on the side of this. Fork number two, more freedom-loving, cypherpunky Ethereans. Now, what would happen in the event of a contentious hard fork like this in the context of some form of large government attempt at censorship, like OFAC censorship, for example? Before I talk about that, though, I just ask you to please like and subscribe if you're finding this video helpful so far. Now, if you had a contentious hard fork like this, clearly all of the large regulated entities like Lido, Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, Circle, which is the issuer for USDC, the US dollar stablecoin, these would all side with the OFAC bootlicker side of the fork, unless they wanted to risk losing all US banking access as well as other government and regulatory licenses. In particular, Circle, who, as I said, is the regulated issuer of the USD stablecoin, USDC. Circle is backed by companies like Goldman Sachs, for example, so they're really part of the traditional, the TradFi system. In particular, Circle would honor the bootlicker fork number one. Now, this would create some serious problems because for every one USDC, which is this crypto stablecoin, there's only one US dollar backing it. This is how it's supposed to work. So the problem here is that Circle cannot choose to honor both sides of the hard fork, since that would mean that they would have to honor conversions of one USDC to one US dollar, one real US dollar on both sides of the fork, which is clearly impossible when you only have $1 actually backing each one USDC. Otherwise, they'd have to sort of magically double their money that is collateralizing USDC. So what this means is that USDC on the freedom-loving cypherpunky side of the fork would become instantly worthless because it would be backed by $0 at Circle. They'd be supporting the other side of the fork. Now, this would be really bad news for any DeFi protocols on that freedom-loving side of the fork that are collateralized by USDC, because now a large portion of their collateral USDC is worthless. So then what you end up with is massive instant liquidations for all of the DeFi protocols that are backed not only by USDC on this side of the fork, but also that are backed by DAI, which is the algorithmic stablecoin that is also at this point largely backed by USDC. And so you'd have these liquidations where USDC would collapse, cause all of these collateral liquidations, and DAI would have the same problem. We can see here if we take a look at what is backing DAI currently. I'm not sure which side of these is correct, but DAI generated by collateral, USDC is 39%, and on this side it's 21%. So either way, even if it's just this side and this USDC that's underlying DAI became worthless because Circle was no longer standing behind it, you would have a depegging, and each DAI would be worth a little bit more than 80 cents rather than being worth $1. So you can see this problem. As Circle itself points out, USDC dominates the DeFi space because it has a stable peg to the US dollar. So this is very essential collateral. And what happens, what basically Circle is they are sort of kingmaker at this point for Ethereum forks. Whichever side of a fork, a future hard fork that it chooses, along with Coinbase and Kraken, but especially Circle, this will become the official supported side. In other words, the new and improved official Ethereum with built-in OFAC censorship. And this is what happens when you link your protocol so closely to an external thing like this that can be attacked and regulated and compromised. When all is said and done, the freedom-loving cypherpunky side of the fork will be just a hollowed out shell with no real economic activity, no DeFi ecosystem left on top of it, and very limited liquidity. You could also see huge liquidations of ETH itself, to the extent that the liquidation of USDC and DAI capital leads to further spiraling liquidation. So it could end up affecting either side of the fork as well. What you're going to end up, though, with the cypherpunky side of that hard fork will look something like Ethereum Classic. It won't be quite as good as Ethereum Classic because it won't be proof of work. But you can see here that Ethereum Classic, which is sort of the original version of Ethereum, has a diluted market cap of 4 billion, whereas the full Ethereum, which is now proof of stake, has a diluted market cap of 220 billion. So this is what happens when there's a fork and one side loses and becomes irrelevant. Again, I'm not a fan of ETC, Ethereum Classic, at all. I'm using this more as an example, and we can see what's happened to ETC, Ethereum Classic versus ETH. It's been a disaster for all holders of this, and I think something similar would happen if there were a contentious hard fork. This is what the cypherpunky, freedom-loving side would look like. It would become hollowed out simply because USDC and Circle would not side with it, simply because they're not able to, because they're a large regulated company. This thought experiment implies that it's probably inevitable that Ethereum will become captured, OFAC captured, or captured by some other regulator or piece of the government at some point. And you can see now why US Treasury, Congress, World Economic Forum, ECB always have these nice things to say about Ethereum, but not Bitcoin. This is one reason they want Bitcoin to change the code and become proof of stake so it can be much more easily controlled like Ethereum is. These people, they love their private jets, so it's not really about Bitcoin's energy usage or environmental impact. It's more about control. And DeFi, in particular US dollar stablecoins like USDC and to a lesser extent DAI, are externalities that give huge power to governments and regulated entities. And then proof of stake just exacerbates the problem by concentrating power in the hands of a few large regulated validators like Coinbase and Kraken and Binance, etc. And then to make matters even worse, most Ethereum people outsource their nodes to Infura, which is owned, as we said, by ConsenSys and controlled by Joe Lubin, as well as Amazon Web Services, AWS. So there's not this same robust home node network that can refuse these changes as you have with Bitcoin. So what are the implications for Bitcoin? I would say that Bitcoin should be quite wary of becoming too intertwined with US dollar stablecoins, whether on layer 1 or layer 2, keeping this in mind, keeping in mind all the dependencies that Ethereum has on DeFi and on DeFi collateral like USDC. That's not quite as bad for Bitcoin because Bitcoin is proof of work. And as we said, most Bitcoiners run their own full nodes and verify all blocks all the way back to 2009. But it's still something to keep an eye on, and especially with reference to protocols like Taro, for example, and issuing stable coins in this way on Bitcoin. I think that's something that we should think through very carefully and be a little bit wary of for similar reasons. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions, your comments, what you think about the argument I've just made in this video in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.